Just like that, we reached the end of Dragon Ball Daima. What a crazy journey it's been, eh? Not because of the show, but because the fandom of Dragon Ball has split itself down the middle. That Daima is the worst thing in existence, or the greatest thing in existence. Nobody's quite sure at the moment. But whatever you say about it, it was extremely refreshing to have episodes every week again for the first time in like 7 years, yeah? But it is that time though. We have to talk about the series as a whole. Ponder about things, both good and bad. And you may have noticed, and we've not exactly been subtle about it, but we've enjoyed our time with the series here on this channel, haven't I? Maybe more than most, honestly, and we enjoy talking about what we liked about Daima, but still, to be completely fair, we also need to focus on the stuff that didn't exactly work out as intended, and honestly, it'll be easier to sum it all up here. But let's start from the beginning and talk about the most interesting aspects, the double-edged swords of this entry. The setting. The demon realm is really charming, especially the third demon world, which we got the best look at, and honestly, having enjoyed the inhabitants and the little world details oh so much, it was kind of sad that it disappeared for a little bit. I get the idea that the second demon world is kind of deserted in terms of friendly species, but it would have been nice to have seen some more Glinned ruins, honestly, get to know more of it, aside from flashbacks. Same with the third world. The series has set my expectations that we're going to be learning more about different types of margin people. And while we see some of the Deborah-type entities knocking around, they're merely background material, which is a shame, honestly. I get why Daima had to get our move on in terms of pace, but that was a problem a lot of people had. But ultimately, we still got a little bit of weird padding from time to time at the same time as it being fast, and it could be filled with some fun elements from across the realm. Also, another thing that works both for and against this series is the cast. The earlier half has a pretty big focus on Glorio, Shin, Pansy, which we really welcomed and appreciated. Goku worked kinda great as a door opener for these characters, and I enjoyed seeing their interactions with each other. Same goes for Neva, Hybis, and others. But the problem is that once the team grows, we got the standard Dragon Ball problem of characters standing there, speaking maybe one line, and not doing much else. And then they somehow dropped Kibito, who really could have done with some screen time. And don't get me wrong, Vegeta finally got some W's in this series. Piccolo also didn't fall off too much behind them, and even though I expected Shin Nahare to be more active in the final act, he still did a really good job in this series. And I think the creators ultimately struggled to juggle so many personalities and continued the pretty tired tradition of Dragon Ball of the supporting cast just fading into obscurity by the end of it, which is really sad in a 20-episode series. But I am glad, however, that it's slightly better than before, as everyone was able to contribute something against Goma, and that a lot of success they were getting wasn't simply down to Goku fixing everything. And to this show's credit, when the dynamic between the old and the new cast was there, it was really charming. It made me smile. I especially like Goku and Gloria's weird friendship, and episode 19 made me really question if the Saiyan was truly messing around with them. Same goes for Hybis' no-nonsense attitude around Vegeta, or Bulma and Pansy showing a lot of respect and concern toward Neva. I still say that Shin is the biggest winner of Daima, like I just mentioned earlier, because he was given more to do. He knows how to utilize Goku's strength, having just used it in the Buu saga. He's smart, resourceful, generally good-mannered, and we also learn that he's quite humble, not quite comfortable with being called a deity still. And anyway, I'm happy that he was part of the main cast. And while Beerus is meant to be kinda distant and alien, while still having some humanizing traits, Nahare does seem more relatable, yeah? And he finally stopped being a meme in our eyes, really. I now get why this guy is the Supreme Kai, and while he doesn't always succeed, he's doing the best work he possibly can, dang it. And I don't know if the writers considered him being humbled by Goku and Z as any turning point for his character, but you can read it as that. He has great respect for the Saiyans, and quite honestly, I can see that it goes both ways. This isn't just one-way traffic. Goku even says that it feels wrong to call him by his actual name, and just resumes calling him Kaioshin. Let it just stick for a while. This is the man who dared to threaten him before and slightly shattered his resolve, and yet tells him that his moniker matters, that he is valid, you know? And while this might not have been an intention, If you think about it, this makes their interaction and friendship more valid indeed, and I think that worked. I also think that the adventure aspect is working much better than it did in GT, as the series seems to be more committed to the explorative beats and doesn't seem to be ashamed of that aspect at all. And to add to the list of things which seems to work in Daima's favour, the kid characters don't feel annoying. We do say that it is a significant nerf for them and that it takes them some time to overcome a lot of the issues that is connected to their smaller frames, which is good. What's also pretty neat is that, as expected, we had a lot more of the classic Dragon Ball martial arts than just simple beam struggles. They're nice, but it's good to see variety. Not only that, but thanks to enemies using magic and weapons, we do see some crazier setups. Majin Do reminded us why Buu gave Toriyama creative freedom years ago, and yet somehow he still feels like he does his own thing. There are controversial things too, mostly related to the fact of the pacing that, admittedly, could get a little weird. Episode 19, for example, won't convince anyone who is here, mostly for the spectacle. A lot of it is related to the viewer's expectations, but to be fair, when the show is trying to pay homage to all of the Dragon Ball eras at the same time, the proportions and balancing out might be slightly violated, from the lack of a better word. Also, it's good to see more cerebral characters do stuff, like Bulma, Arinsu, Ku, Neva. They get their moments as well, not just the strong people. We said it many times before, but it is worth repeating. The old Namekian is one of the more entertaining characters in this, just because of his overall aura. He is a little bit of a deus ex machina, but to me, it's a nice reminder that power can have different meanings in Dragon Ball, and that there are definitely entities mightier than our crew in one or more sense. The villains are serviceable. It is nice to see different angles and different bad guys plotting and scheming, but sadly, Degasu ended up to be a very big disappointment in our eyes. We really did hope for him to get more screen time with his brother, and he ended up being terribly underused, which only shows that they suddenly ran out of things for Shin to do by the end of the Daima season, which also ended up harming his sibling in the process. Now, don't get us wrong, the characters are fun and amusing. Seeing the gendarmerie squad messing the palace up, with Goma and Degasu getting more and more disillusioned by the minute, was really funny. We just hope that one of the baddies left a stronger impression with our heroes than just them being fine. While the ex-Demon King and his minion do end up imprisoned for 99 years for good behaviour, Arinsu kind of just gets away with it scot-free, with maybe a little bit of redemption? I mean, I think even she's confused, especially that she really just teamed up with the heroes for pragmatic reasons and is still in the inventor of, slave collars. Admittedly, this was weird. As we mentioned, all the new characters are quite cool. And what especially warms our hearts is the fact that the reception of Majin Ku changed throughout the series. He's quite unique personality-wise, and wasn't meant to be just a mere Boo 2.0. Him and Do are a package deal, and they work quite nicely, continuing the trend of duos in Dragon Ball, and yet in the finale, he was shown to be the heart of the story, taking place as the unlikely candidate for the throne of the Demon Realm. It was such a perfectly oddball choice that I am sure no one expected Daima to commit to this choice, and honestly, it worked in his favour. To me, Ku and his brother are a sleeper hit for the series. I don't think anybody expected Goma to be beaten with a literal book to the back of the head, who someone is part Cybermen's because of it. Like with Gamma 1 from Superhero, I really do hope to see them in the future. Even if they just get a short sequence of them visiting and playing around with Majin Buu, that would be kind of fun. A bit of a missed opportunity here, honestly, that we didn't get more. Now, next thing worth discussing is the fan service, and honestly, there isn't as much of it as you might think. Obviously, Super Saiyan 4 is a huge deal, but it's a very late development. We might add the power pole to the mix, but I do think that it makes sense for Goku to take it, especially when he was younger, so he could compensate for his shorter stature in the series. Also, I'm not gonna lie, having all of that lore felt good. I mean, for us at least. We were scratching at the bottom of the barrel for the last 7 years, and knowing that a lot of the stuff was really close to what we had envisioned, well, it feels really cool to this day. And at the same time, we were surprised a couple of times. So it's not that everything was super predictable, but it was a nice mixture of both, We are content, and hope to see more in future installments, honestly. This is one of the aspects of the series that made it truly special and personal for us. Something that we consider our private reward for all of these years theorizing and pontificating. Maybe it's a little bit self-indulgent, but hey, art is subjective, yeah? People are allowed to like or dislike it for different things and reasons. Still, in a very OG Dragon Ball way, some elements of the lore will be questionable. After all, it seems that Goku did already know about Super Saiyan 4, which is a weird tidbit if we were to consider Super and Daima to be part of the same continuity. I'm not sure if I like this, considering that he supposedly acquired the form by training alone after Majin Buu. I also know that the post-credit scene revealing that evil Third Eyes was still in possession of the shopkeeper they met earlier was a little much, but it did make us chuckle. I do consider a final screw the audience joke by Toriyama. We thought that he got softer with age, but in the end, he trolled us, as he used to, for one last time. However you'll take that depends on how much you accept Dragon Ball as an action comedy, which it was for a large portion of its existence. It's a litmus test almost, to see how you react to the joke. To some of you, it might have felt a little bit too saccharine, as no one really dies, and at times conflict isn't treated that seriously. But you've also got to consider that Toriyama was fond of this tone of story. And you know, Goku making a hole through Goma and 2 demon realms is kinda cool, even though the eye fixed him. If Ku knocked it out of him earlier, I imagine the results would be slightly more gruesome. Still, the final bit of the encounter against the Demon King was truly spectacular, and pretty special, even though someone unexpected got everyone the win. Quite honestly, this was the best outcome. But before we go to our final thoughts, there is one big idea that could probably work in Daima's favour, and would save it from a lot of the problems that are keeping it from becoming truly excellent. It could have been a movie. Sure, you would have had to cut some stuff, but realistically, this entire story could have been told as one long 2-hour-ish entry, which would cut out some of the weird and sometimes awkward padding. You don't really need to cut as much exposition as you might think. I'm pretty sure with some clever editing skills, you could sort of cut the entire 20-episode run into a 2-hour movie. Initially, it seemed like they had a plan, and every episode, while slow, had a purpose. And then, once the characters hit the 3rd demon realm, there was a really weird mix of really quick episodes and weirdly slow ones that did not really push the story in a meaningful and satisfying direction. At least not from a storytelling standpoint for the purposes of a TV series. There were still fun moments, but I'd be lying that even with our positive attitude, we didn't see things in the series that were slightly jarring to us. Particularly the weird pause of the Goma fight between Kid Super Saiyan 4 Goku and Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta. Or some really wonky editing in episode 15 that felt like it was missing some scenes entirely. Also, the fusion bug ended up being the Chekhov's gun that never fired. I do wonder if it was produced and written to a certain point, and Toriyama's illness and later tragic departure slightly sabotaged the latter part of the series, meaning that it was left a bit rudderless. Was there more planned that never made it to the final cut? We might never know. And keep in mind that Daima has been in production for way longer than you may have anticipated, and the movie quality animation is the best example of this point. The worst you can say about this series from an aesthetic point of view is that it looks just okay, but nearly every episode has something spectacular going for it. The music, the sound design, it's all quite awe-inspiring. And while Jaka-Jan was really catchy, there was this one moment in episode 14 where our heroes get to the first demon world for the first time, and the wind is blowing, the villains are slowly realizing that they have arrived, and there was no music. The ambience was doing all of the heavy lifting, and you could really feel the chills going down your spine as the barrier was broken and something ancient had been lifted. Trust me, have loved that scene, and it probably isn't a moment that most of you would choose as your favourite from the series. But still, it's time to sum everything up. We really liked Daima. Whilst it was at times awkward and weirdly paced, it was a love letter to the series. It remains true to the franchise, both with the good and the bad, though it gives some freshness in that light. It doesn't feel like it's become GT's replacement or anything. It's more like a warm embrace, inviting it into the midst of other more successful series in the franchise. Some of you prefer the original, its more carefree, adventurous nature, and simpler times when martial arts were more important than tons of transformations and beam struggles. That's okay. A ton of you joined the fandom at the height of Z's popularity, where you were entranced by the sheer scale of the battles, insane designs and aesthetic that was unlike anything you'd seen before. Others were on two sides of the GT dispute, not really in terms of criticism, but rather of it deserving to be part of the Dragon Ball canon. Super wasn't that different, honestly, but after a rough start, it managed to find its footing and stick the landing. It delivered a finale so explosive that it carried stuff like weak antagonists and the return of Frieza, and kept people hyped. And then there is Daima, the anniversary series that tried to take all those ideas, embrace them, and connect them, while maintaining its own identity. Does it succeed? No. No, it doesn't. But what a beautiful and enjoyable failure it's become. And I don't mean failure in terms of bad show, rather that it never rose to the absolute height of the entire franchise. Maybe that's just not possible anymore. Maybe it never was possible. Maybe a lot of things that made Dragon Ball a multinational sensation had that you had to be there energy while it was airing live. Still, you can't call this a passionless and joyless project. I think in a way it's very personal. To Toriyama himself, and to those that had the realization of carrying over his final project. I think that even if Daima didn't revolutionize the franchise, the world is a better place with this little story in it. It's funny, it's charming, it's beautiful. It's sometimes awkward and jarring. It's exactly like Dragon Ball made us feel countless times. And it probably dropped some of the biggest lore bombs in the most casual, nonchalant way. So that's been Dragon Ball Daima. Apparently, the red katakana character in each title means something, according to Akio Yoku, so we are waiting for someone to decipher it. Also, we are quite sure that the powers behind the series are already planning what comes next, but for now, it is goodbye. It's a shame. I've enjoyed our stay in the Demon Realm, honestly. I wish we could have stayed for a little bit longer. I really do hope that we won't have to wait another 7 years before we get another animated series like this. It's nice to unpack them on a weekly basis, honestly. But anyway, after 20 weeks, well, 21 if we count the break, there is just one thing left to say to you. Thank you, Toriyama, for everything.